right, okay, let's get started. Hey guys, you made it back. If you're still here from the previous episode, thank you for sticking around. If you're here for the first time, hi guys, my name is Ryan, and I'm going to be your host for today. We're taking over the Adobe Live broadcast to bring you Offset, the fun show where I get to bring on really cool artists and interview them about their process, their inspiration, their work, and any questions that you may have. We're streaming to both YouTube and Behance. Most of the conversation is happening over on Behance. So if you are on YouTube, please hop on over to Behance. I'll be keeping an eye on both chats for you, though. We have Sam Peterson holding down the chat as moderator, who is the perfect moderator for this stream because big fan of Sam. And I feel like Sam and Jonah also have a lot of crossover as far as inspiration and art. So it'll be good to have the two here live and for your entertainment. So today we have on Jonah Lobe, who is an immensely talented artist. He has worked in video games and concept art. He's also working on his own piece of a graphic novel, which we're excited to work on and take a look at. And we will be just going through everything that makes him tick, which is really exciting. So hello to everyone in the chat, from Umacorn to Mike, Bruce, Sam, Steve, Gareth, Oliver, you name it. Also, if you're watching this as a replay, it's great to have you here. We should be keeping things moving along, so hopefully you should be able to watch it as a replay and enjoy it. And I just appreciate you taking the time to watch this and getting to know Jonah. But that's enough about me. I am excited to bring in our guest of Jonah Lobe. So please help me in welcoming him and bringing him to Adobe Live. Welcome to Jonah Lobe. Hey, Jonah.
Hello. How you doing?
I'm doing great on not too far from you in Brooklyn. We're
right.
Streaming through the Brooklyn tubes to bring you to Adobe Live.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, I love having you here. I love getting drinks with you when we get a chance to, and I'm glad to be on doing this thing live.
Yeah, and so we're broadcasting from your studio here. Well, I'm not, but you are over in Brooklyn. You have a bunch of cool trinkets behind you that we will get into in just a little bit. But I tried to do my best in being your hype man, but no one's better than yourself to talk about who you are. Do you just want to give the audience a quick rundown of yourself as an artist and a person?
Totally. My name is Jonah Lobe. I am a 40-year-old concept artist, illustrator, 3D game artist, and writer and art educator. So I started my career in the game world, working on games like Skyrim and Fallout 3, Fallout 4. And during that time, I was a 3D artist with a specialty in creature design. So I made monsters, dragons, woolly mammoth, undead, super mutants, that kind of thing. And I made those in 3D, sculpting and texturing, etc. And I did that for about 7 years. And then I moved to New York to go freelance to work on a fantasy series of my own make. And what followed was a very difficult 11, 12 years of freelance work. But some of the best and most amazing growth I've had in my life and certainly in my professional career. So I have changed up my skill set quite a lot, from 3D to 2D. I still like to dabble in 3D and mess around and occasionally do contract work in 3D, but it's one of the circumstances where I just wasn't feeling challenged anymore, at least in the same ways. And I wanted to reapproach art from a different perspective. And so I started focusing on digital painting, on anatomy drawing, and just general draftsmanship altogether. And so there's been a lot of different stages over the last several years where I've been doing that, but it's been going very well. And most recently, I got a book published called Marvel Anatomy, which is right here. I just took a copy out today here. Marvel Anatomy. It's still in the cellophane wrapper, but it's basically an anatomy book of heroes and villains from the Marvel universe. And it was a great opportunity for me to combine my love of figure drawing with my desire to get better at anatomy work and draftsmanship, and allowed me to add the term Illustrator formally to my title. And that was really cool. And that had given me the oomph and the kind of self-confidence to dive into this next project, which is a comic book of my own making.
Well, and we are really excited to jump into that too, because I know we'll be working a little bit of that on stream today. It is exciting to also hear kind of like the journey of your transformation of 3D to 2D, and this kind of constant fascination with creatures, whether that it's just like full on non-human like creatures that don't really have like the sentient of a main character, to this idea of like you're kind of creating this humanoid new character that's very human, even if it's not, I mean, it's a skeleton, right? So it to a point has human qualities to it, but kind of having that transfer as well from a beast to something that we all very relate to. And it's cool to see that, and I'm excited to jump more into that. I feel like the best course of action would be to go ahead and take a look at your work, just so people who are unfamiliar with it can get familiar. So let's hop into our very first segment, which is let's look at your work.
Let's look at your work.
So I went ahead and I pulled up your website, which is just jonahlobe.com, if you want to go check it out. And you have a really good way of actually documenting not only your process, but your way of kind of walking through your journey as an artist, and really showcasing the best sides of you. You even have like a talking head or so. And then of course, obviously, if you go up here, you can actually hop right into the own art and we can look at different pieces. Is there anything in particular that you really feel showcases your work the best out of the ones that you have here?
You know, if you go down to character art, that will show you kind of the beginning of my career. And I think what a lot of these are all each individual 3D models, so you can actually rotate that around, etc. As we go. And yeah, it kind of showcases the work I put into these sculptures. And I learned a lot about design sensibility and in creating very detailed sculptures, and yet focusing on their simple aspects to generate designs that are detailed, yes, but ultimately kind of iconic and memorable. And so that was kind of a lot of the emphasis I put on the work and in my own education early in my career. And then in recent years, however, if you go back to the art section, I did about 2 years of pen and ink art, or a year and a half of pen and ink art. And so if you look at those up there, this was my effort to almost step back a little bit and try to figure out how to do more with less. So how to embrace a variety of different visual styles, and how to use just black and white to create visual balance, to focus on composition, that kind of thing. And those ink drawings were my first real substantive foray into composition. In the 3D game world that I was involved with before, I had an awesome job making these really cool characters, very detailed. All this implied storytelling, age, wrinkles, scales, all these things. But I never had to work on it myself in the context of a larger composition, except for that just being the game. And so each of these pieces of artwork that you're looking at now, none of them are more impressive than the 3D art, because the 3D art took me each piece a month long, and each of these took maximum 2 days, basically. And yet they represented a really massive step forward for me in terms of learning, because I started thinking about things more in terms of rectangles, squares, how to fill a space, how to tell a story. And it also taught me a lot about how to self-produce. When I said that I finished a lot of these things in a day or two, that wasn't just because I work fast or whatever. It was because I made the promise to myself that I would start the concept and finish it in the same sitting. And what that did was that it allowed me to...
That's something to kind of like hold yourself to. I feel like that's a heavy task sometimes.
It is a heavy task. And I think it was a really necessary task for me as a freelancer, because when I was in the employ of a 3D game company and I could just work on something until it was just perfect, I might drive my producer nuts. but I did not suffer any repercussions from that, from being a perfectionist. Being a freelancer requires that you generate things at a much higher rate, much more quickly. And I wanted to get to a point where, especially because I was working with pen and ink, I wanted to work in a medium where I actually could not make changes or corrections to a piece. Once it was done, blemishes and all. And
so you weren't even doing pre-comps of a kind of thumbnail for it. You were just going straight in with ink?
No, I did do quick thumbnails, and then I would do a quick pencil sketch. But then a lot of the little minute details would come in at the ink stage. And so, and especially I was working with colored markers. By the way, the orange there is gold ink. So in person, this is a piece that shines, quite literally shines. But once you make a mark with ink, you're committed to it. And so invariably, each one of these pieces is riddled with mistakes. But focusing on the whole and not getting hung up in these little mistakes helped me to come to grips with and make peace with the fact that my art is never perfect. And in fact, the sum total is greater, the be greater than the sum of its parts. So even if the sum of its parts are imperfect, I can move forward with that. So it really taught me a lot about time management and to not let perfect be the enemy of good. Is that that's the saying.
Yeah. I think that's a really good thing to also keep in mind as well as an artist, just because it's always that constant battle of perfection and like obviously time management and expectations and reality. I think it's really interesting to hear that you said these are like riddled with errors, because obviously I look at it and nothing stands out in particular to the naked eye as far as things that stand as errors. I think that you have some really cool exploration of composition, which, as you were saying, isn't a big idea in 3D modeling, because that's up to the programmer or whatever to then kind of put your 3D into place. But it is really interesting to see this evolution from 3D into 2D. Do you feel like your understanding of 3D models and how much time you had to spend with 3D models gave you a better understanding of how to translate that to 2D? Or do you feel like that got in the way where you were like, I just wish I could model this?
Yeah, good question. I think working in 3D helped me cultivate a much stronger understanding of shape language and of three-dimensionality, whether or not you're actually working in 3D. So I think like the idea of form, the idea of building up form, the idea of shapes were very much something that like I internalized over the first 7 years of 3D modeling. And when I moved over to 2D, I think I was much more cognizant of these things. I certainly wish there were times when I wish I could model something, but I just know myself and I know how much time I'm liable to spend sinking into those things. And when you work freelance, no one's paying you most of the time to do much of anything. And so I really actually did embrace the imperfection and the idea that when I finished a piece, if I wasn't happy with it, and I was only happy with it a certain percentage of the time, that's okay. It's part of the process. And in fact, it's necessary to do the stuff that you're not crazy about, because that just frees you up and just kind of loosens your shoulders. And you're like, you know what? Yeah, I'm not perfect, and I won't make all perfect things. But as you say, if there are glaring issues, they don't pop out. And I think that is probably due to my extreme emphasis on the basic shapes and forms and how they fill the page. Because if those very simple shapes and forms fill the page in a pleasing manner, you can make all kinds of little mistakes and people will forgive you, because they're paying attention to the big, simple gestures in the piece and not the little minutia that you may have.
The small intricacies that you as an artist and the creator are hyper focused on, even though everyone isn't as much.
Right. Exactly.
We have a lot of activity in the chat, which is really great. Thank you everyone for all your kind words. There's people talking about the book. Remember, Mike's nephew has your Marvel book. Also, Bruce is excited that he scooped that one up as well. Someone was also mentioning that there was only one left on Amazon, but thank you to Sam for posting that link so people can track it down. I will say that Peter has a question for you, and he says, "Where
Yeah.
did you go to school?"
I went to high school in Maryland, a public school in Maryland, and I went to college at a place called Skidmore, which is in upstate New York. It's a liberal arts college. I was an arts major. I always knew I was going to be an artist, but I did not want to go to an art school per se because I felt like it was a foregone conclusion that I would be an artist. And what I really wanted from my last 4 years of learning, formal learning, was to learn lots of different subjects. I didn't want to learn just painting or just sculpture. I wanted to learn about the world. And I just felt like I didn't know how exactly it was going to happen, but I felt that whatever I did, whatever I learned would somehow feed back into me being a richer person, which would somehow feed back into my artwork being better. I don't know how, I didn't have a plan for how. I just knew that I didn't want to just dive into the art right away because I wanted to be a more kind of well-rounded person. So it was I think it was the right call for me, I think, at the time.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to hear the journey of your artist understanding and your perception. Do you feel like if you were to talk to college age Jonah, he would be happy kind of where you landed?
Certainly. Absolutely. Yeah. I think I discovered Bethesda Softworks when I was that was the game studio I worked on when I was in college. And they became a goal of mine to work there, but I could not have fathomed that they were going to make some of the biggest games ever. Right. I just knew that the game that they had come out with at the time, called Morrowind, was really cool and really unusual and totally weird. And I'm very pleased I got a job there. And I could not have guessed that would have been such a launch pad for me professionally, because they really did a great job on, and the team we worked on, everyone really pulled their own weight and made some great games. And I think that they really positioned me in a really nice way. So even as a broke freelance artist, I still feel like I'm in a good place. I have this resume that I just am so grateful for. So yeah.
And then also, I know that it also comes to terms with the idea of you as a gamer and you as an artist. Kind of, which came first, the art or the gaming?
Certainly the art. When I was young, I used to draw all the time. I loved drawing, monsters and skulls and things like that. And my parents would not let me. They did not buy me any video game systems. So I never had a video game system, except for when we got a computer a little bit when I was in elementary school, and then some friends of mine gave me some games on floppy disks. And I do mean
floppy disks.
They're actually floppy disks, not the compact little ones, but the truly floppy. Even as a 8-year-old, I would look at this thing and be like, "There's got to be a better way."
There's got to be a better solution to this. And so just thinking back then, what kind of games really resonated with you, and do you feel like it impacted your art today? Did you like kind of this fantasy style always, or is this something that you grew into?
Good question. I'd certainly always loved fantasy. I've always loved fantasy. I when people say they grew up on Lord of the Rings and everything, I remember lying in bed and reading that stuff. I remember reading The Wheel of Time, the Shannara books, that kind of thing. Elf Quest was a big graphic novel series of mine. But when it came to games, I think I got kind of a broad assortment. It was kind of, for a while, it was whatever anyone would give me. And so, for instance, I got SimAnt, which was a game bought by Maxis, and it's all about being an ant in an ant colony. And I loved that game. And for years, even when I was working at Bethesda, I dreamed of making another more advanced version of SimAnt. And I was researching all these different kinds of ants and just figuring out what can these different ants do, that kind of thing. I played Prince of Persia, which obviously is a big franchise now, but back in the day, it was a very simple game with pretty basic graphics, really, really, really basic. And yet the animation, it was the first rotoscoped game ever. And this guy had taken 4 years just to kind of pixel by pixel make these animations that resulted in some of the most lifelike animation ever. And I remember that leaving quite a big impression on me. Hey, there I am.
Yeah.
Um,
You can keep talking. I'm just adding visual flourishment for everyone. This was your 3 exercises in quarantine, which
yes,
we can also
and
talk about that in a minute too, if you'd like.
and I want to point out just how sweaty and quarantine-y I look in this picture.
Quarantini, what a good adjective.
It was the dead of summer, and I was trying to create content for YouTube, and I wanted to create some things that people could do. I think that being at home, a lot of people were feeling like, oh, now I have all this time to do art. When it came down to it, what they felt was stagnant and unsure what they wanted to do. And so I created this video, but I'm looking at it now and I'm like, gosh, my hair is a disaster. Why didn't you shave your neck, you Neanderthal? What's wrong with you?
Well, it's 2020, is it not?
Oh yeah, it was.
Oh,
this is
that's par for the course, baby. It's totally, everyone looked like I have pictures of my hair from 2020. Like, you got to remember, there were no vaccines. Like, everything, all self grooming was on you, which is asking a lot of people.
Oh yeah,
So,
oh yeah.
there's no shame there.
It's certainly a disaster, and I had no AC in the house because we live in New York, and so what you get is what you get. So I definitely have that oily look on me, but yeah. So yeah, gaming and fantasy definitely went hand in hand, and I remember Doom was a really, really big deal. When I finally got Doom, I thought this changes everything.
Yeah. Which is so funny because now, they're doing remasters and stuff of it. And, obviously it didn't age well in a visual sense as to like our capacities now. But then at the same time, it still has such a cultural impact of how video games are made that, it's definitely part of the history books. Now, I did want to bring up this part because there is a part of your presence and your career as an educator and an instructor. I know that you stream on Twitch, Adobe Live, and Behance. How did that come to be? Was that something that you always imagined? Is that something that you'd like to do more of? Or are you happier when you kind of are just working as a freelance artist yourself?
Yeah, sure. It came up completely by happenstance. I never thought that I wanted to be an educator. But the main reason I didn't want to be an educator is because I kept imagining, when I remember the other art majors at my school or the other kids who would take art classes in my, in college, when I thought, when you're paying so much money to go to school, I remember how few of them were really serious about art and who really, really cared and were really applying themselves. And I thought to myself, I don't want to be a teacher because I don't want to be in a class full of 20 kids, knowing that only 3 of them really care about art.
Right.
But then Twitch came along, and I started doing it because I was working on an indie video game called Fireborn a couple of years after leaving Bethesda. And my friend was like, you should get on Twitch and show your work on Twitch because that will build up an audience of people who are expecting the game. And this is my first foray into really seeing what you could, what it meant to work in a public sphere and get attention from an audience and kind of build up a potential buyership. And so I started streaming the process of creating art assets for this game, Fireborn. And eventually the game Fireborn died. It was never produced. But what I had was several thousand followers. And I thought to myself, what am I going to do? I have these several thousand followers. I enjoy making art on Twitch, so I guess I'll just keep going. And so I kind of kept going, teaching people my workflow, that kind of thing. And what I discovered was I could make art and speak at the same time because they use 2 different parts of my brain.
Right.
And I really got into it. I really enjoyed it. And what I really appreciated about it that ran contrary to what my thoughts were about education was that only people who wanted to be there joined the room. And so everyone who was watching was into it. And so suddenly I just suddenly knew that I was performing in front of an audience of people who cared. And that then, I was then noticed by Adobe, who pulled me on board onto their regular cast of streamers alongside people like Sam Peterson, et cetera. And that was then a more formalized, attempt at actually educating. And so Adobe, to this day, anytime I stream or do Adobe Live, Adobe never tells me what to do, ever. And they grant me perfect freedom. And yet it is a venue for education. And so for me, it's perfect because I get all the freedom I want. I get to work on the things that I want to work on. And so essentially, I treated my time at Adobe very seriously as like, great, now I get to teach myself things and others in the process. So today I want to learn color theory. Today I want to learn composition. Today we're going to cover anatomy. And basically I got to teach myself and teach others at the same time. And so that's when I really, really started falling in love with education, because I realized that I didn't have to stop my career to do these things. I got to continue my learning process, but now I got to do it. And while doing it, I got to educate others. And I'm a big believer in the democratization of education. I think education should be free to everybody. And I think in this modern age with YouTube and Behance and all these different resources, it's so possible. And so I have really kind of changed around my thought process on education entirely. And now, I consider myself a very fortunate human being, and I am grateful to do what I do. And so one of the ways in which I try to pay it back to the universe is continuing to provide content, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on my Patreon, whether it's on Twitch or YouTube, that basically can educate people in any corner of the world on any number of issues. And so, yeah, I'm really into it these days, and I love streaming.
And you're regularly streaming now, right? When can we catch your streams?
So I've started doing it 2 days a week, but I'm actually going to transfer that over to 3 days a week as I work on my comic book. And so I'll be working on Monday, Wednesday, Friday from, I want to say 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll see how that goes. I might tweak the schedule a little bit, but essentially, just as with the education before, the audience will be joining me on my own path. And I don't know where I'm going. I mean, I do, because I know I have to make a comic book, but I've never made a comic book before. And so I'll be basically, I've written the script, I'll be doing the storyboarding and the paneling and all that stuff. And then anyone who wants to join me on this journey, they get to have input on the story, on the visuals, and they'll get to see basically my thought process illuminated in real time, along with all the little screw ups and imperfections we're talking about. But I'm hoping that the process of doing that and showing just how disheartening and humiliating certain parts of the journey can be, and yet knowing that that's part of the journey, I think that's a big way of kind of demystifying any artistic process or journey. And I think that's a big deal, because I think a lot of people see finished art and just assume it's magic and it just became like that.
The art button,
which exists now in the form of AI. But I think that seeing that journey illuminated is, with all its blemishes and everything, helps a lot. And so that's what I'm going to be doing. So I'm doing it partly to educate and just get it out there, and partly to just promote the book.
Yeah. So in the chat, Umacorn is sad about it. She keeps missing the streams when you are working on Quiet. And Peter says he would love to observe the process. So I think we're in a perfect position today to hop a little bit and see kind of what it would look like if you were live on your own stream. So do you want to pull up some Quiet and we can work through a little bit and continue to talk?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. How long have you been working on Quiet as a concept? I know it's been a few years now where it kind of came to be. And do you want to talk the first stages of Quiet, where he lives and in your brain and I guess on the page?
Totally. So yeah, I have a couple images here. So one image I started, I'll actually just pull these up. One image I started on the Adobe channel years ago. So I'll pull it up now. So what you're looking at right now, by the way, is the villain from Quiet. And we started this on an Adobe Live segment a little while ago, maybe about 6 months ago. And but it's all returned to that in a moment. But this was just a painting I did on the Adobe Live channel. It was all about lighting and figuring out how to paint materials, that kind of thing. And the conceit of this image was that this is a level 1 skeleton in a dungeon, if you're playing a video game. And in most video games, of course, you're supposed to run into the dungeon and kill all the skeletons and get the treasure and leave and go to level 2. But I thought to myself, what if there was a level 1 skeleton who was afraid of the dark? Who just he's just walking around with a torch in the dark in this dungeon and he's scared, and wouldn't that be a cute kind of funny concept? And this little character kind of started to show up more and more. And so I'll show you a couple more drawings where this character kind of began to appear. If I can find them.
It immediately makes me feel way more guilty if I'm like grinding through like Diablo or something and I'm killing all these level 1s now. I think this will really change the perspective of people not wanting to, attack these poor little guys that are just kind of holding down the fort.
Exactly. Well, I was literally thinking of Diablo when I made this. This is another piece I did. This is from my Word of the Day series on Instagram. It's called Irremediable, which means cannot be undone. And I just had this little joking character, this little skeleton these awful crows are stealing his limbs, and and it's like he's not going to get those back. He's just. And I thought to myself, what a funny, hapless little man. And there's
so sad.
I know, it's very sad. It's very sad. Here's a picture I did called Phantasmagoria, which is all about the shadow play and everything.
Love that.
So I have this little skeleton character with this light, and then all these kind of scary shadows are kind of zeroing in on him. And so these are kind of where Quiet first started appearing. And then I began a series during the pandemic where I was trying to create something that was, in fact, I have a whole folder here, where I was trying to create something that was charming and nice and could be shown in episodic content. So it was my attempt to create episodic content that people could, a story that people could get into, and create a character that people could really relate to. And I think what really tipped the scales on coming up with this character was having a baby. We had a kid, and as you can tell from the look of the belly and everything like that, this is kind of like a little toddler shape, and I think this is one of those concepts I wouldn't have thought about beforehand. Incidentally, you asked about process before that, and this is for a segment later on in your show today where we talk about sketchbooks, but you can see, the form and shapes developing. You can see me trying to figure out, what these images look like, and then that'll be the thumbnail, and this would be the final. So,
all right. I mean, if you want to, we can even actually just hop into that segment right now if you'd like.
Sure. Well, yeah.
All right, let's take it away.
Ooh, let's see your sketchbook.
So tell me, are you mostly a physical sketchbook guy or are you mostly a digital sketchbook guy?
I haven't done sketching in a sketchbook or on any service except for my iPad in kind of a while, which I regret. Mm-hmm. I love working in traditional sketchbooks. So I'll sometimes do things that are study-based. So I'll literally just take an image from anywhere and just draw it. And in this case, I'm working with pens and markers.
Do you have a favorite type of pen or marker that you normally kind of gravitate towards?
I do. I like flexible tip markers. There are these Pigma markers Pigma pens that have these kind of soft tips that just create a lot more flexibility. And so anything these days with a soft tip, I'm really into. And so that, and then Copic markers basically is what I'll often deal with. So some of what I'll do will be studies like this, where I'm both practicing my hand-eye coordination, which is kind of just something you have to kind of just keep up. If I don't draw for 2 days and I sit down and start drawing, invariably I'm gonna suck, just like for a while.
I mean, it's debatable, but I have the beholder, I guess.
I think there's certain ways in which you hold your pen, in which you move your pen, in which you approach a drawing that can be quite stilted until you start hitting your flow. And I think I need to draw several times over, just sketching, just to hit my flow. So a lot of
it's at the dog park for these sketches, or are you kind of pulling up reference images that you're going off of?
Just references images. I'm not so good that I can capture this stuff so fast, unfortunately. Yeah. And then what you're looking at here is, again, me exploring Quiet and like figuring out what I like about him. And these are not what he looks like now, because I wasn't sure what the aesthetic was for him, but I was messing around with it and just trying to find something good. And then I started to find my stride. And I hit this one and I was like, oh, that's genuinely cute. That's good.
Gotta have that cute factor.
Got to have the cute factor, exactly. And so I started working on these images where the purpose of each image for the Quiet series, of which there were 12 at the time, was to create a composition-heavy piece of art that was uncomplicated, that conveyed a certain feeling just through the composition. And so, for instance, here, I had a scene where the forest was burning down. And so I kind of came up with like, all right, here he's running towards the camera, here he's running away from a burning blaze. And then I kind of came up with this composition, which is kind of a tilted composition. And I'll show you the more in-depth version of that, which is this. And the whole goal of this was to create a feeling that of a giant ball rolling downhill.
Indiana Jones style.
Indiana Jones style, a giant flame wall going downhill, and this is the downhill area, and here's our main character. And then I had these stuff, trying to figure out what he looks like running, trying to figure out what the other animals look like when they're running, sketching some drawings I saw online, and then coming up basically with the finished piece.
Wow.
So incorporating a lot of negative space in the piece.
Yeah.
In a case like this, and just experimenting. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that I wanted to focus on composition composition itself doing a lot for the piece. So that's the piece there.
Yeah, the black choice is really something I wasn't expecting when I was looking at your thumbnails, and to see that you turned it and kind of really leveraged, to your point, that negative space is a really great choice. I love how the animals kind of go back and you can kind of see their panic as well, but it goes along with also your idea of being afraid of the dark and creating drama. So this is wonderful.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I did this process a number of times over, just trying to figure out how to encapsulate an idea. In this case, Quiet has to proceed down into a tunnel to meet Spider, this character here, and so
Also
just
terrifying.
trying to figure out kind of, that was the thumbnail, and then here's the final, kind of creating these concentric rings around him, darkening him in silhouette. He has putting a pot on his head as a helmet, and just messing around with that. And then I have the bad guy appearing, and the bad guys who were coloring today, and the bad guy was originally this very blocky barbarian. Again, I was speaking the barbarian from Diablo, big dude with huge horns on his helmet and a big giant axe. And there's this, you can't really tell what's going on here, but I have my little hero hiding down here, Lord of the Rings style, and then you have the guy walking up there, and that ultimately became this.
Great.
And so you have him with his.
I love that
boat.
scene.
Yeah, thank you. It's a scene we've seen before in movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's no less effective because of it. And you kind of create this feeling of huge weight and oppression and power up here, and then this little, thin little guy down here. And yeah, so I made these 12 illustrations for this series, and I narrated each one, and kind of like in a storytelling mode. And so each video was like a storytelling, and I would kind of show the process as I went. So I'll just bring up one right now.
And Bruce is saying he loves the angles of the design compositions, very different, and he says, "Well done."
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you. Nice to have you on here, by the way. So this was an example of kind of how I would go about this series, trying to create this episodic content that was appealing to watch, that was engaging, that pulled you in, and that allowed me to flex my muscle as a storyteller, because being a storyteller was just not something I've ever gotten a chance to be. And I really, really wanted to just begin the process in a public way of maneuvering myself into the realm of storyteller as well as artist. So this was just it was kind of just an attempt at seeing if people were interested. And what I found was that people really, really, really liked this. It's not like that they got a million hits or anything like that, but what I found was that people never forgot the story of Quiet. when I started mentioning him, people would say, "Oh, that little skeleton character," and that, I only did 12 drawings, and yet everyone seemed to remember Quiet. And so that to me told me I've got a winning formula on my hands. I got a protagonist that people can root for. And again, I did it and I conceived of it truly in the beginning of the pandemic. I think the world was a very scary, uncertain place now. It's gotten so much better now. Just kidding. The world is still a scary, horrible place. But
you can relate to Quiet in that sense, then.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I wanted something that was very much an underdog character, something that was cute, that was lovable, something whimsical, because I tend to default towards a little bit more darker content, and I wanted to go with more whimsy, with more fairy telling feel, and I wanted to create a story that people would latch onto. And so here I am a couple years later. I just finished Marvel Anatomy, and that was a wonderful, wonderful project. But I kind of hit a point where I was like, I can't do any more things for anybody else for a while. I need to do something that is my own. And I thought that Quiet would be a really good beginning to that. I did it, by the way, before the stream. I did a little mask, so I can
Ooh, look at this. This is talk about that art button, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I think that as you bring that up, I think that's a really great time for our segment about Burnout. You spoke a little bit about working with for somebody else and working in a process of a very long project. What would you say is a good technique or a good approach to when you have to work on a really long project that you're not too wild about? Do you like to take a walk? Do you tend to look at other artists? Do you watch TV? Do you take a nap? What do you do?
Yeah, great question. Oops. That was the wrong thing. Sorry. There we go. I try to challenge myself as much as possible. And so with Marvel Anatomy, for instance, which was a giant project where I had to focus, I had to do, 230 pages of book. Because
that's a lot to stay on a project for.
It's a lot. And I knew signing up for it that I was going to be in trouble, right? I knew that, I'm not historically the most intrigued by sorry, there's some flickering going off my camera. I don't know if that's on my end. I don't know why that does that, but I have not historically been that entranced by heroes in general, and so I knew I needed to have a way to make this interesting for myself. And so in my case, I really challenged myself on a per page basis to do something wildly different, compositionally and subject matter wise. And so when I started the project, before even starting one page, I just went through and thumbnailed every single page from the book, and I made sure that I was alternating between long distance full body pieces, close-ups of certain body parts, close-ups of the face. I was alternating them with just different kinds of details that would hopefully help with stagnation, with feeling like I was drawing the same perfect six-pack abbed hero every page.
That's super important. 6 packs,
some of them have 8 packs. It's very intense. They definitely work out a lot, these heroes. And so I set myself a challenge where basically I made sure the challenges were more than anything unique from each other. And then once I get started, I listened to a lot of audiobooks and I watched a lot of TV. When I say watch, I mean I just had a lot of TV playing in the background while I worked.
Right.
And oops, do that. And so that helped out a lot in terms of keeping my left brain or right brain, whatever it is, occupied while I worked on my art. And so it basically allowed me to keep my brain occupied or my mind occupied while the hand did most of the labor. Because a lot of art, I think there's this myth, as I'm sure many of viewers right now are aware of, that art is all about inspiration and the muse, and it's just not true. The muse is very important at the beginning of a project, and at certain intervals it can really help you through, but a lot of art is just chipping away at the artwork you have to do, problem solving as you go, that kind of thing. And so that the reliance on story and narrative in the form of a TV show, movies, books, really helped to keep me occupied. And then if I just wasn't feeling up to working on one thing one day, I would just exchange it for something else and just always leave myself an out to do something kind of different along a different stage. So yeah, walks are great. Working out as many days as you can. Doesn't have to be a serious workout at all, but just to get the body a bit more feeling a bit more relaxed and a bit more like it's done something today, helps that feeling of like that you're a dog that hasn't been walked all day, that you need to get out of the house.
Coming up next is Jonah Lobe's high intensity workout. He'll be walking us through a 60-minute workout on Adobe Live.
Yeah, whatever you're wearing, take it off because we're about to sweat.
I do have a question for you about saying consuming content and media and kind of having inspiration from it. I know you mentioned that quiet comes from a place that's also inspired by being a father. Do you feel like now that you are constantly absorbing kids' content as well now is making any changes to the way that you're approaching quiet?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure about that. Yeah, I think I'm keeping more of a mindset on being whimsical, on keeping things lighter than I otherwise would. And I think focusing on the fairy tale aspects is what's really keeping me interested in many ways, because I have the skin on multiple layers. Great, good job, Jonah. It's allowing me to not think about the lore and the motivations and all these things. These things matter. Motivation of the villain and of the hero matters a great deal. But I have this fantasy series I mentioned that part of the reason I left Bethesda, and I wrote the first book. It was a big, long book. I got representation. We almost got it to a publisher, but it didn't quite work out. I think about that series a lot to this day, and I think about the mechanics of plot, how one thing leads to another, and how what impact certain events have on the psyche of certain characters, etc. And it's very tiring, and it can get very dark, and it can get very a little unpleasant, not just in terms of for the characters. And I think that with Quiet, I really want this to be a lovable, fun, at least for a while, more lightweight entree. I want it to be very accessible, and I think, I think when you become a father, I don't know what changes in you biochemically, but I can watch Cars and almost cry at the end, and I'm like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me?
It really gets to your heartstrings.
It does. But then you think, you realize they have actually very talented writers, making good stories and who understand the story. So it certainly has affected me. The full extent of that is as of yet, I'm unclear on, but it's definitely doing something to my psyche. I'm all.
No, I mean, it has to make sense. Also, by the way, in the chat, we want to welcome Gus and Kendall. Welcome, guys. Gus says the legend right here. And don't get me started on Jonah's freestyling. What's the freestyling about? You rapping now?
Not now. What's up, Gus? Yes, I on the Adobe channel and on my Twitch channel, I used to rap. Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that. See, this is news to me. I'm learning things as well.
I would just... there was a period, speaking of wanting to learn new things and always challenge yourself. I remember one time I was sitting around and some friends of mine started freestyling, and it just looked like so much fun that I was like, I want to learn how to do that. And so I just started learning to do that, in the car, on the car ride to work, that kind of thing. And it ended up being just a very rewarding way of spending the time. And so I got pretty decent and started doing that on stream. And so I would just ask for I would just be freestyling and ask for people to just say words. And I would just try to, sorry, cop car. I'm in Brooklyn.
Oh, I wasn't sure if that was me or if that was you.
Yeah, well, it could be either. We're both in the same borough. They're everywhere. Yeah, so that was the thing. But I haven't done it in a long time, and I think I'm a little out of practice.
A little
And
rusty.
I don't think you want to hear it from me now. So.
About this guy that you're working on now, I know you mentioned he was the villain. I know you said you're working on like the lore of struggles within your characters and seeing them go as well. What are his motivations? What's his name? What's his deal? Is he the hero of the guy that's going through the dungeon?
Yeah, so he is our barbarian character. You know, he's the Diablo-esque style guy. But he's basically, you know, when we were talking about, you know, going into a dungeon and massacring all the skeletons because they're undead, you know, and not even thinking twice and just moving on. He's that guy. He believes that he only knows, he and his people, they're not actually humans. They're something called, or at least I'm calling them for the moment, the protog, and which is a play on the word protagonist. And they believe that there's only two directions in this world. There's the direction of right and the direction of wrong. And so he has he walks the path of right always, and he has an unerring ability to always, wherever he is, always locate his next objective. It's basically it's almost a straight line for him. And so he's this giant tank of a man who believes in his heart that Quiet is evil. And Quiet is not his enemy. Quiet is a level 1 skeleton that he overlooked. So he's, you know, but to him, especially because Quiet is a skeleton, there is no other way to justify his existence other than that he's just an evil aberration. And so he comes from a world. There's the world tree, which is where my comic book takes place, and that's part of the reason I'm calling my comic Quiet Level 1, because he's a level 1 character, and the story starts in level 1 of this world, like kind of almost like in the root structure of the great tree of existence. This character comes from a different world, which was a different tree of existence, and his people, you know, the protog, aka the humans, they've destroyed that world, or they've mucked it up seriously, and so he's on a quest to travel to this world tree and get to the base of the world tree and then cut it down so that it will fall and his people can attack it, basically.
And once again, you're making me feel bad about playing video games, so thank you for that.
Yeah, there you go.
Bruce is in the chat talking about how you're laying you're naming your layers, which is always great. We love to name our layers. But I also want to kind of see a little bit about your process of what is indispensable in your workflow, and kind of what is a good tip or trick for us when we're creating our own work.
What? I didn't know that was there.
So what is one piece of I don't know, tip or trick or tool or anything that you kind of use regularly that you wouldn't be able to live without when you're creating something in Photoshop here?
I am a big fan of, up until the moment when you actually start creating the final lines for a thing, just smushing and moving and that kind of thing. And so something that I discovered, which I'm very grateful for, is liquify, something I use a lot of. And so I'll go into the liquify command like this, and I'll say, you know what, this foot should be way bigger, and I'll make it bigger like that. I'm working on the line layer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I'll do that, and I'll say, like, great, I did it. It's now bigger now. This is a really nice way for me to adjust things that I need to adjust that I wasn't happy with. But then I thought to myself, but crap, now how do I get all the other layers I've worked on to do the same thing? This, again, might be so basic to so many people, but if you just go back into filter, and without hitting the liquify ... you know, I'll just pull this down a little bit, but you hit the, just the regular liquify right here, it will do what you just did exactly on the same section of the canvas to the same area. And so look, it just filled up that brown, like right there. It just popped it back up into place. And so I've discovered that I can just do that to a whole succession of layers, and everything, and that liquefy move I did can apply to all the different layers. And so as somebody who likes to work loosely and push and pull things around, learning this extremely basic functionality, which I should have known years ago, I'm really grateful for.
No, because it's also really great because it's non-destructive. See, that's a fantastic tip, because for me, what I would normally do to kind of create a solution for that is I would end up like creating a duplicate and merging it all down and just being like, all right, I guess I don't have layers anymore. But the idea of using this kind of procedural click to switch between layers and then have it just do the auto update is a really smart decision. Do you normally go back in and recreate lines after you do that, or do you feel for the most part Liquify is able to morph it without it being too destructive to the line work that you created?
It certainly depends on whatever I'm working on at the time. Yeah, it depends. Sometimes the tweaks will be so small that I'll just let it go. You know, as per our discussion earlier about like when there are issues with a certain piece of art, but the issues are so small, most people won't notice. Oftentimes, people just don't notice when I use it. It is a little destructive, and so it's worth it. It's worthwhile to kind of give it a go to try to like make some tweaks. But I do it. I make tweaks less than I probably should, and I've churned in finished work to clients that had those kinds of small aberrations on them.
Yeah,
and because a lot of my work is looser, or it's drawing or painting based or whatever, I think a lot of people just don't notice. So there's been a few instances where the client said, "Hey, what is this?" And I had to make changes, but in general, you know, it's the forest for the trees. And so if you know a couple misshapen, warped and liquefied trees, it's all good.
Yeah,
So,
no, in the whole composition, it's not going to be the same sort of thing. Like, we're not going to see all the blemishes and imperfections that you might see as an artist in the same way.
no way.
We're about an hour into our show. It's flying by, which sadly means we only have about a half an hour left. But since we're about an hour in, I like to normally do this exercise called monkey paws. All right, and Jonah, how are you feeling? Are you feeling like you want to take a break and do an exercise, or do you want to keep working and I'll guide everyone through it?
I think I should. I want to keep working, but I'm so used to that feeling. I think we should do it together.
Together. All right, cool. So I'm sure you might be familiar with this. If you guys are not familiar with it, it is from I learned it through Anna Davisworth's streams. She streams on Behance and Twitch and Adobe Live, and you can check out all of her work. She made these beautiful illustrations down here. Also, hello. Just as we were starting that up, I saw that Wade entered the chat. Another big fantasy nerd, which is great to see you here. Great illustrator. Check out his live streams as well. And Kendall is here. Sam, you guys know it. So what we're going to do is we're going to reach towards your screen or your camera or whatever with your hands out like this. And you're going to bring it in. And you have to say ooh, ooh, ah, ah, because it's all part of the process. It doesn't work if you don't. And you're going to release. Then you can go down like this, thriller style, and bring it in. Ooh, ooh, ah, ah. You should be able to feel a little bit of a stretch in your wrists, which is nice. But don't overdo it. Obviously, I'm not a medical professional. Gonna flip over for the third way, which is to give them away. Ahead and bring it in. Ooh, ooh, Thank you, Kendall. Appreciate it. And then the very last one is towards you after that. And bring it in. Yeah. See, I've been doing it already. This is my fourth time doing it this week, so I don't have as crazy as faces as you, Jonah. But normally, I am making real ones. Especially this one in particular is the one that I always feel. And I always really like these because I said it on previous streams too. But the ones when you go like this, you like go against the wall, kind of freak me out for psychological reasons. So this one's always just like a very easy way. You can do it anywhere. You can do it, on the toilet. You can do it in the shower. I don't know why I'm sticking to the bathroom, but you can do it basically in your own time. Maybe you're commuting. You don't have to have them necessarily extended fully out, but just kind of moving your wrist around and bringing it in is good. You don't want to get carpal tunnel. You don't want to overextend yourself. Remember to take breaks. Stretch out your neck, go for a walk if you need to, and just remember to focus on your body. So that was your reminder to do monkey paws. Now, I am having a great time seeing your work and you work on this awesome new character, but I think it can be a little disheartening to people who are kind of in their workflow and they want to get better and they don't know how to get better. And so I think it's always really good to be able to look back at previous work and see how it impacts your current work. Right now, you're working on the coloring and the shading of this character that we have here. And I think it'd be a really great time to take some time to go back and look at some older stuff. So let's do our segment called From This to That.
From this to that.
So I went ahead and I went onto your Instagram and I scrolled way down to the very beginning. You have a lot of content, let me tell you that. You are one of the most productive and efficient person of posting work. It was just like work after work after work. It's like, how far back are we? We're like, all right, we're in 2021. All right, got to keep going. So props to you on that. But I really wanted to land here back on August 7th, 2015. You did Gang Ja, and he's got plans. You created this very dramatically lit character. Do you want to talk a little bit about what this piece is about?
Well, I think it's very appropriate that you bring that up in the context of not being happy with your work. Because this was a piece, so I mentioned my fantasy novel. I left my game company to work on a fantasy novel. And my dream was to illustrate it, not every single panel by any means. It was going to be a standalone book with interspersed color illustrations. And what I discovered very quickly upon beginning this process was that I did not know how to illustrate because I'd never done it before. And so a piece like this, ultimately, I'm quite happy with how it turned out. This is actually one of my wife's favorite pieces from this journey of trying to illustrate my fantasy series. But it took way too long. It was way too hard. And I was just very displeased with my process. I just felt like there was lots of ways in which this was just not coming through. And again, I look at it now and I think, cool, like I recognize that character. I like that character. I'm pleased with the work in general. I would have done a lot of different things differently if I was approaching it these days. I know from practicing that if you try to print this, it does not look good. It looks terrible. These things do not print well. And so this was part of me trying to create a collection of art for my fantasy novel. And I was so disheartened by the whole process of trying to do that I quit the illustrations entirely. And so I just vowed to myself that I was going to take a break, and I would continue to work on the book, but I was going to need to do a lot more practice of digital painting because I simply did not know what I was doing. While my draftsmanship was decent and I was rigorous as possible, I was just pouring hour after hour after hour and coming up with results that just were not where I wanted them to be. And so, so it's appropriate that you talk about being disheartened with your artwork, because this is a piece that, even though I'm happy with the piece itself, when I look at it, I still feel the pain and frustration and self-loathing that comes with being an artist.
But I think that's inspiring to hear you say, because as someone who's an outsider looking at this, I mean, I think this is a beautiful piece. I think you're doing some really cool things with color and lighting. The composition is, nice and cropped and close, which is cool. You got some cool things going on with the eyes too. So it's interesting to hear that, this has blood, sweat, and tears in it in a way that you have a relationship to it that's different from everyone else. And I think that's really important. I think we can also look at some other stuff that you have kind of the same time.
Totally.
I mean, take aside from this beauty. But we have something like this where it's once again feels like, was this part of a crop in of a bigger sketch, or is this the full composition?
No, this is a crop in of a much bigger sketch. And this was my protagonist from the fantasy series. I didn't have kids, so I didn't know like how they age or what they look like. Yeah. And so I've since this looks like a 5-year-old. In my head I was thinking she was like 12 or something.
No way. Okay. All right.
No, I was way up. I never drawn kids. I didn't even know how to do it. And so again, there's aspects of the image that I really like, But in general, it's a mess, and it's not what it needs to be, and that's not where it needs to be. And so it's one of the circumstances where you can be maybe somewhat happy with the piece of art that you made, but still be cognizant of, yeah, but this didn't turn out anything like how I wanted it to. You know, it's like it's a picture of some nice little girl, but she's not my character, you know, or she's just not done right. So this was a part of a bigger piece where I was just trying to draw my main character and trying to figure out what she looked like, and just try to figure out like, what is her look, you know? And I still don't know. I'm much closer now than I used to be, but yeah.
But you are a response. You are a response of your surroundings. I think that this would be a cool time to also go in and talk a little bit about what inspires you and what is surrounding you at any given point. Like you said, you were having a kid. But I would love, as you were kind of alluding to at the beginning, if I could see your collection.
Could I see your collection?
So I know you have a bunch of really cool trinkets behind you. It's obviously you're in your studio. You're not in your home space. This is where you work. How do you stay inspired with the collections around you while you're working?
I very rarely hang up my own art, unless I'm like really proud of it. I just don't like looking at it that much. But what I like to keep here is just like a collection of things that inspire me, but also that are kind of hallmarks for my own personal life. And so I try to kind of create a diary of like my nerd life, So here I have a number of masks from Skyrim. So this looks like it's made of wood. It's not. It's plastic.
Oh wow! That's cool.
But this was made by a woman in Puerto Rico who's an incredible prop maker. And I have a number of masks like that. And so I was really proud. The Dragon Priest masks were an element that I made for Skyrim that were never on the agenda, that were never supposed to be made. I just invented it with a friend of mine, and they ended up being one of the most cosplayed pieces of art from Skyrim like ever. And so I'm very personally proud of them. So I have a number of them. There's another one.
That has to be crazy to see, like to go and see people cosplaying and things that kind of originally came from your hand,
It's really cool. It's really cool. My dream is to one day go to a convention and somebody's dressing up like a quiet character. That would be cool.
You're going to have to get a child for that one, though. Otherwise, they're going to be a giant quiet.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, which would look really cute, though.
Yeah, right.
This is a piece of art from when I worked at Bethesda. There was a concept artist who worked there who I didn't know it at the time, but I knew he was very, very good. He worked in only traditional media. He did some digital, but mostly traditional. And this is a piece of his that his mother sent me. So he actually passed away a year before I left Bethesda, way before his time. And I wrote an article about him on Kotaku. It was kind of all about him, but also about creativity and work ethic. And so when I was so inspired by his work ethic. He just worked so much, and he was such a constant student of art and always wanting to learn and always attacking art as an art form. And it really woke me up to be like, oh, I get it. I'm a good artist, but if I want to be a great artist, I have to work all the time.
Right.
And so I keep that up there always to remind me of him and of his life, etc. I have lots of little random things here. This is a 3D print of a helmet that I made from Skyrim.
And did you sand it down, or does it have the little ridges on it?
Sorry?
Did you sand it down, or does it have the little ridges on it?
It does have tiny little ridges on it. I did not sand it down. I don't 3D print myself. I don't know how to.
Yeah.
But I like that.
Which is interesting actually to hear, because like as a 3D artist, it would be really interesting to see how your creations would be able to then manifest in a 3D printer if you had like a MakerBot or something.
Yeah, it'd be really fun to do that. I think when the tech first came on board, it was you had to be so skilled with it,
right?
And so patient with it. I just wasn't willing to spend time.
Just yet another thing to learn. Yeah,
exactly. I try to very, very much focus my abilities on what I can kind of do. Here's a collection of metal dice that, speaking of 3D printing, that I just worked with a guy in Greece to help put these together. They're gorgeous. He just ran a Kickstarter that just closed today, I think, or is closing today. That is ending today. Anyone interested in these metal dice, you can look up the Kickstarter now. I think it ends in the next couple hours, maybe. But I'm about to start my first Dungeons and Dragons campaign in like a week and a half. I've never done it before, and I'm like, here we go, baby. Here we go.
Well, you have Sam and Wade in the chat, so if you have any questions for them, I'm sure they would be happy to help you out. I feel like they're D&Ding all the time now.
I definitely would like to talk to them.
But and then I also see you have a stack of books behind you. Do you normally feel like you are flipping through books when you're finding inspiration?
I do sometimes. Sorry, let me just show you this real quick. This is a character called the Guyver from the 1989 cartoon, and I'm just showing this off now because I just got this in Japan. We just got back from Japan, and I'm thrilled with this purchase.
It's very cool.
This was a very formative thing. Yeah,
and it has like a little dowel on the back, so can you like repose him and have him like off of his feet if you want to? That's cool.
He's extremely posable. Like his whole body can be moved. There's several different detachable hands. He's got like this pose and this pose. And this pose, you know, all that stuff.
Very neat.
I've got a number of spectacular drawing books here. Some of them are tutorials. Some of them are a collection of art books. So I've got like, you know, I wanted to make an education course on designing fantasy armor because I just see a lot of like derivative kind of crap, pardon my language, and I wanted to be able to basically create a course on how to create good fantasy armor. And so this is you know, I have a bunch of reference books of just like amazing real life art. You know, I'm a huge believer that really good fantasy should be sourced from the real world, because otherwise it just looks like bubblegum, you know, plastic kind of creation. So in this, you know, books like this are wealths of information for me. And if I want to, especially with regards to concept art, which is just the creation of new kind of cool art and new ideas for games or movies or whatever, those kinds of tomes are very helpful. And then I've got amazing art books like this Art of Paul Bonner. This guy is staggeringly amazing. His use of form and color is just like unparalleled. And he has these, I think they're watercolors actually, which is kind of nuts, but these huge illustrations that are just incredibly inspiring with regards to these characters having so much armor and little trinkets and little like kind of tiny little details in these pieces that just span, you know, they're just so big, but everything's rendered so beautifully and with such a physical feel. So a lot of really good art books like that. The occasional, I've got, you know, some anatomy atlases. I've got some, you know, wildlife of Star Wars, African masks, some myth books, some graphic novels, that kind of thing.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing. Really appreciate it. We have about 10 minutes left. With a skull. With a detractable jaw, which is cool. One last piece that I want to make sure that we touch on is a piece of along this theme of inspiration is bringing up an artist that you really enjoy for some art talk. Now, you brought up Sanguine, which I went ahead and I pulled up her Instagram right here as well. And you specifically called out that you really liked a lot of her art, her line work. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of why you chose this as an artist to call out?
Totally. Yeah, I'd be happy to. Funny enough, Sanguine is a man.
Pardon me.
But it's funny because I think that there's certain elements that a lot of female artists will embrace versus male artists will embrace, whether that's natural, social conditioning, whatever it is, or just influences. And I think that there's a very powerful feminine energy in Sanguine's work, and that doesn't have. And that's you know, the fact that he's doing these females, that's only part of it, right? I think there's a lot of individuality. There's a lot of character. There's a strong emphasis on grace in the line work itself. So I have, literally hundreds of people I look up to artistically. And so when you asked me to come up with someone who I brought up today, I literally just kind of almost pulled a name out of a hat. But
Right.
we covet, when it comes to being good at art, we covet that which we can't really do ourselves. And when I look at this flowing line work, when I look at the muted but effective color schemes, and I look at these silhouettes, I just burn with jealousy, because I want to be able to do this, and I just at the moment can't really. There's a lightweight flowing aspect. There's an ability to communicate extremely convincing anatomy, while also hewing to very stylized proportions in line work. And it's just, this individual is strong in all the ways I am weak, right? And so, just look at the colors there. I don't even know how you make those decisions, and yet they're great, So that's somebody who I've just, who whenever I see their work, I just look at it, I go, damn, I want to be able to do that. And, I never probably will, and that's fine. Like we all have our own abilities, and we can sharpen our tool sets where they're weak, etc. But I'll probably never get to that level. But I can study it and I can learn from it. And I intend to do both. Just look at that. If you were to take that image right there and divide it between white and black, and just have all the background be white and all the colored areas be black, you'd have a spectacular silhouette. It'd be such an engaging silhouette with some fine details, nice curving line work, a general slight imbalance that creates a gentle, just like a cloudy kind of flowy feel to the whole thing. And my work is much blockier and chunkier and grittier, and I'm kind of a slave to a sense of realism in many ways. And so I can't. This work is visual poetry to me, and I am not a poet, even though I wish I was. So that was an example of somebody I just wanted to show, because I just felt like, this is an individual who's doing nothing of what I am doing, and vice versa. And I am so jealous,
Well, thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. And thank you to Sam for throwing that link in the chat for us. We have about 5 minutes left or so. And so I'm just pulling up some of the stuff that you were working on a little bit more with that shadowing. I think it's interesting that you self-identify with such of a blockiness, because I feel like, especially with those pieces where Quiet is looking down the path to go visit the spider friend, I feel like those have very flowy aspects to it, as well as the flowiness of when Quiet was running away from the boulder. I am always interested to hear kind of how artists compare themselves to others, though. So it's interesting to hear your relationship with Sanguine.
Yeah, I think if there is similarities there that you're noticing, it's only because I am pushing the very fabric of my being to try to get as close to that as possible.
Which, it's all part of being an artist, And I think that
absolutely.
It's even from this to that segment that we had a little bit ago, just seeing your transformation, how things continue to find their own path is really inspiring. Also, hello to Pierre and Sean in the chat. We are just about closing out in the next few minutes, but if you want to catch me in the replay, it will be available online. So make sure you go and you check out everything that Jonah has to offer.
Yeah, to your point, Ryan, I think the temptation on my part would be to look at someone like Sanguine's work and say, look how effortless it is. Because it looks effortless. It looks the lines are perfect and flowy and all that. And I think that would be a big mistake to assume that.
But the same can be said for you, though. A lot of the stuff that you do just looks effortless because it looks right, But I guess we're all on the same boat.
All in the same boat. Totally. Yeah.
Also, I know that you mentioned something about the flickering, but I feel like it's a nice motif to Fallout. You can just have a little cyberpunk to it. Not cyberpunk, but what would you even call it? What is that style?
Retrofuturism,
I guess.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
But like dystopian.
very dystopian. This is a
Would you
dystopian stream.
Would you ever see Quiet as a video game? Like, would it come full circle because it's kind of based on the idea of a video game?
Yes, I totally would, but I'm not sure what such a video game would look like because I wouldn't want it to be combat centric.
Right.
And so I've definitely been thinking about it and in my head kind of marketing it in some ways as a video game and thinking to myself, well, if it did be decently well, would I sell the idea to a game company? And if so, what would they have to say to win me over? I definitely think it's the kind of thing that is a kind of a franchisable, applicable kind of title.
Yeah.
But I'm certainly not banking on that happening at all. I think I would like to get through issue 1, and then I'll see where I'm at with regards to taking over the world professionally. But my dream, honestly, is to finish issue 1 via Kickstarter. So if anyone's curious, I will be kickstarting Quiet in, I'm thinking beginning of September is what I'm aiming for.
Okay.
Whether or not that happens, we'll see. And then if that goes well, then, or even if it goes even decently, then I'll make issue 2 and I'll continue. And I have a general outline of the entire first graphic novel, which is going to be called Quiet Level 1. And then we'll go from there. Yeah.
I mean, that's a loaded summer for you to kind of tackle and get that done, but I have faith in you.
Thank you.
As we close out, though, we can find the Kickstarter through your socials once that starts up sometime in September. But until then, we can catch you on Twitch. You said on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays for 2 hours, right?
That's correct. Exactly.
That's the plan, at least, for it?
That's the plan. Yep, that's the plan. So this week, I was planning on starting this week. As you and I talked about, Ryan, beforehand, my family just tested positive. I think we caught something on the way back from Japan, but hey, better on the way back from Japan than before or during. So,
on the way there, to catching on the plane and then just being like, cool, I have COVID in Japan now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, we're actually, honestly, we're pretty grateful that it's happening now as opposed to later. So anyway, the point is, it was supposed to start this week. And obviously, my plans have been a little stymied, but I will be working on it in some capacity, hopefully as soon as Friday, but probably you can start seeing me next Monday, then Wednesday, then Friday, and I'll just keep that train going as long and as consistently as possible. I'll also be uploading content to YouTube, both process videos and then just videos describing the process of creating a comic book.
Great. Well, we'll be sure to check you out on Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, Behance, you name it. We'll check it all out. Thank you so much for taking the time for being with us. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for being here. Thanks for everybody who took the time to watch, and to all the people who I know in the stream, Sam, Bruce, Wade, all these people. Pleasure.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
All right, guys. Well, that does it for today for Offset, but we still have 4 more episodes this week. Same time, same place. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning if you're on the West Coast, at noon if you're on the East Coast. And we got some really great people I'm really excited to share with you. It was a pleasure having Alex and Jonah on today. Once again, my name is Ryan Selvy, and I am a motion designer here that live streams. We'll be back again tomorrow and the next, but stay tuned because we do have more Adobe Live coming up. So check out here and it'll just push you on to the next thing. Thank you so much for everyone in chat that hung out, and thank you guys for being here. It's a pleasure doing these series, and just thank you very much. Thank you to everyone. I don't have time to go through all your names, but thank you for being in chat, and I'll talk to you real soon. All right, bye guys.